Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to FVDelements, and in this episode, we are doing what I guess is considered the holy grail of FVDelements, and that would be a Cobra roll. That's just based on the number of requests I've gotten for it. And to tell you the truth, I was actually kind of hesitant to do this element because I think they're pretty tough to do. It definitely took me some time. I don't see many people actually doing these even in hand building. I think they're just really hard to do and to make them look right. So I think I did a pretty good job on this one. I'm pretty pleased with the way it came out. If we take a look at it, it looks pretty much like a Cobra roll. It maybe could come down a little bit lower. I'll tell you what, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to do first, we're doing this one. This is what I'm terming the Snappy Cobra roll. And you'll see why I'm calling it that when we actually ride it in NoLimits, because it ends up being a pretty snappy roll. It kind of reminds me of the Cobra roll on Alpengeist, which in fact is a little bit too snappy for my taste, but I know some people really like that. So we're going to do this version, and then I'm going to do another version later on where I do want a little more kind of like the way I've said repeatedly that I like my B&M elements, which is more sort of flowing and graceful. So I'm going to try to do two different ones here. But you can see it's fairly, just looking at the shadow, you can see it's pretty symmetrical. It rides pretty well. If we take a look at the graph, you can see here, from here to here is the Cobra roll. So all this right here is the Cobra roll. And you can see why it took a little while for me to do this. I'd say it probably took me maybe total of 3 hours. I did, if we switch to project, you can see I did several different versions of it. I started off with this, which obviously that looks nothing like a Cobra roll, but it's kind of an interesting element anyway. I might do something like that comes out to the side sometime just to see. I kind of like the way that looks, but it comes across more as like something you were fooling around with in FVD, and you invented, quote unquote, a new element, even though it was because you were trying to do something else. And then I started to get a little bit better each time. As we go down, better, it starts to get better and better. And finally, this one is actually pretty good. I didn't realize that one came down so far. Let's take a ride on that real fast. See what it looks like. This is why I didn't like this one, because when we're up here, you can see here, it's really just off. The shaping is not right, so that's why I didn't like that one. So we ended up with better, even better, and best so far. So this one is pretty symmetrical, and if we take a look at the graph, like I said, you can see the Cobra is a complicated element, so I'm not going to go 100% through this. Just basically say that we're going up into positives. We kind of come down. At first I was going all the way down to negatives. I didn't think that was working, not negatives, but around 0 G's, which is generally what I do with a loop or an Immelman or a dive loop or something like that, but it really wasn't working too well. I could probably fool around with that some more and get it right, but basically the roll itself is not too difficult to do, and I think you could actually do this with a quintic, sinusoidal, nope, quintic. I think you could do that with a quintic double bump probably, if I fooled with it a little bit. But we're not doing that. We're going to leave it as is. I'm not going to mess this thing up. It took too long. There we go. All right, so it's basically just rolling one direction and rolling the other. The difficult part was getting the shaping right. That usually is the difficult part, and in this instance, it turned out to definitely be the difficult part. So it was basically just kind of fooling around with how these normal forces were going before finally getting back up into the positives. So I'm not gonna go through too much through that. I will put a link, of course, in the description where you can download the file and take a look at it and alter it for your purposes. See how I basically did it. So if you're trying to do a Cobra roll in FVD, you'll know how I accomplished it here. One thing I want to stress, though, is this is where it's important to do this. I don't always do this when I do these FVD elements, but in this case, it is important to import these things into NoLimits and see how they ride, because riding this, it doesn't seem particularly snappy. We just go down the first drop. right into the Cobra roll, and it seems fairly normal, but when you actually take a ride in it, it actually looks kind of slow to me. But when you actually take a ride in this in NoLimits 2, it's much more snappy than it looks in FVD. So we're going to switch over to NoLimits 2 in just a minute and take a look at that, take a ride on it, and we'll see what I'm talking about. So let's switch over right now. Alright, so here in NoLimits 2 you can see this looks pretty good. It's pretty symmetrical. It definitely looks like a Cobra. The one thing here, this is driving me crazy, is this it's not symmetrical right here, but that's an easy enough fix. The real problem right there is this normal force just needs to be increased just a little bit up in here so that it matches this just a little bit more. But unless you're OCD, that probably won't bother you too much. And this, like I said, could probably come down just a little bit more. I'll do that in the next episode. Just in terms of when we did the snappy one, we're calling this one the snappy one, like I said. What we'll do in the next episode or in a future episode of a Cobra roll is just try to make one a little more elegant, something along the lines of, say, Hydra at Dorney versus this reminds me more of Alpengeist. We'll do something like, say, Hydra at Dorney that's a little bit slower and not quite so snappy. And if we take a ride on this right now, you'll see what I mean by snappy. So let's go ahead and dip out of here and see exactly what we are coming up with. Alright, so you can definitely see how it really snaps into and out of the transition in the Cobra roll. And that's fun, that can be fun, especially on an older, intense B&M that a lot of people really like. I myself tend to prefer the ones that are not quite so intense and are more elegant, which I've said time and time again. But it's up to you. If you want to do a snappy Cobra roll, by all means have at it. So you should have the file now. You can take a look at this one. And in a future episode, we will do a slightly less snappy version, just so we can experience this from both ends of the spectrum. So that's going to be it for this episode. Unless you all have any questions or comments, like always, if you have something that you want to see, let me know in the comments below, because I have to say I'm really enjoying the requests I'm getting. You all have definitely asked me for some things that I haven't thought to do in NoLimits, or in FVD rather, and it's interesting to get those requests. So if there's something you want to see, just let me know, and I've got a lot of stuff coming up. So that's gonna be it. Take care and enjoy the ride.